Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by none other than Mr. Donovan Mckenzie. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, man.
Uh,
Doing wonderful. Blessed,
uh,
not
uh,
stressed, like I
yeah.
always say.
Awesome. Awesome. So thank you so much for your time today. To give a bit of background on you, Donovan, so this is the first episode where we don't have a pet alum on the podcast, but it's been something that I've been meaning to do, especially since June is Mental Health Awareness Month. Amongst other things, you're a mental health advocate, speaker, social activist, inspirational speaker, all those good things. You went to Guelph Humber to study social work. We're working towards a master's degree in social work
Sir.
and psychotherapy.
Yes, sir.
We're happy to, talk about that. And you've been someone who's led the way for many different, students, businesses. You've done many different events through your page organization called Heart of a Man, which you founded in 2014, representing the shirt today.
All right.
Yeah, representing
Love
that.
it.
Yeah, so I've been lucky to hear your story multiple times, but I figured now was the time, since it is June and it's always good to catch up with you to finally share your story. So without any further ado, let's hop into the podcast. Just fair warnings, everyone who's watching, there are going to be some topics that might come up that are a little bit sensitive and personal. So just keep that in mind. But I guess, diving straight into it, like what makes mental health, so important to you?
What makes mental health so important to me? That's
Yeah.
probably one of the most important questions
Mhm.
I've been asked, and mental health is important. Well, I'm going to tell you right now because so for years I've kept everything hidden, like
Right.
stress, like
Mhm.
dealing with depression, trauma. Like I didn't even have words for it.
Right.
I was functioning on the outside, but falling apart on the inside. And I thought being a man it meant, staying silent. So I feel like, because of that, I know how painful the battle is for mental health and how if you don't get the right support and help, you won't feel safe talking
Mhm.
about it, right? So mental health is important. It matters to me because, I lived the silence and now I'm committed to being the voice I once needed. Every man deserves to feel seen and heard and healed. And mental
Mhm.
health is important because we get to talk about the struggles we face inside, the battles we face inside, things that, we keep hidden,
Mhm.
things that we don't want to talk about, things that we feel it's going to be a lot of stigma. We're going to be judged. We're going to be looked down upon. But it's important to me because your mental health can give you strength, getting the support you need, speaking to, getting the right help and having that courage to say, you know what, I need the help. So mental health is very important.
Right.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's what it means
Mhm.
to me.
Right. And it kind of goes into every other aspect of your life, right? Like there have been studies that show like, if you're stressed and you have poor mental health, it can affect like your physical health or other aspects of your life too, right? And I think we've spoken before about, you touched on like that culture, right? And both of our families are from Jamaica, right? And you touched on the idea of what it means to be a man and what
Yeah.
it means to be a man, especially in those cultures, right? So what are some challenges specifically that, like culture and gender play in mental health?
Now that's a powerful question. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, for people of color, the challenge isn't just mental health battle itself; it's a stigma. All right, the silence and the systems. We grow up. You being of Asian background, I'm Jamaican. You know, I've heard, maybe you've heard it too. What happens in the house stays in the house. And too often this includes our pain that we keep hidden. There's a lot of like lack of representation. In therapy, cultural shame around seeking help and lived trauma from racism, like poverty. There's intergenerational wounds, and these are things I've learned over the years also too. And that's why I also created Heart of a Man, and that's why it exists, to create space where our experience aren't minimized by but centered.
Mhm.
And our healing is taken seriously. Um, I think when you're told as a young person mental health is for demons and it's not something we need to talk about and we need to keep it, to man up and just keep it hidden inside. because we start living that. That becomes a part of us, and we pass it on to the next generation. It's like generational trauma, and
Hmm.
a lot of
Yeah.
stigma, and it's a lot of burdens with that too. That's really
Hmm.
tough.
And kind of your first two kind of things that you've touched on have been a lot to do with like other people, right? When it comes to like the stigma,
Yeah,
community and like family. But like
yeah.
more specifically, how does either like good relationships and good sense of community contribute to good mental health and like vice versa?
How does community contribute to a relationship? Well, first of all, community can either be a trigger or a lifeline. You know,
Yeah.
if you have a good community, that could be your lifeline too. But it could also it could be a trigger for you too. Like we were talking about, like in the West Indian culture. No
Mhm.
disrespect to my West Indian brothers. Love you guys all. Relationships shape how we see ourselves also too. How we cope, how we heal. You know, the right community reminds you that you don't have to go through it alone. Brotherhood, be real, you be vulnerable, you be accountable, you know,
Mhm.
can save lives. Um,
Mhm.
when men come together, also to in a community, in a relationship to talk about this stuff all of a sudden, just to be honest, to listen and uplift each other, there's a lot of transformation that can happen. You understand?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's when healing
Mhm.
becomes possible. When connection like replaces isolation. That's how I feel about it. And that's how the community, when you live in a community that really stands up for it too, like we do, it could change lives. You know,
Mhm.
it could completely change lives, and that's one thing I've learned throughout
Mhm.
these years too.
Yeah, I think there's like a fact about research. Like some of the people who live the longest, they have a
Yep.
good sense of relationships, community. And I guess kind of with our generation, being on our phones is very different to having that face-to-face conversation.
You
And
said
we
you
saw
said
that, yeah, we saw that
it.
over the pandemic, right?
Yes,
A lot of
yes,
our mental
yes,
health started to decline
yes.
when we were in isolation, right? And kind of like speaking about that isolation, something that a lot of people have difficulty with is, for example, like let's say someone came to you and said, "Hey, Donovan, I've been having struggles with my mental health." Um, that's probably like the best first step, right? But like, what
Yeah,
can they do? What can they do after that? Do you have any advice for someone who wants to start seeking help?
it's a powerful question, and I want everyone to listen to this that's watching this and whoever you share with. So you don't, you don't need all the answers. That's what I'll say right away. Okay, you just need the courage to take the first step. Taking the first step is like telling a friend, telling your family member, telling someone you trust and you're okay, sharing this with. You know what I mean? That you're not okay. Tell them that you listen. I'm not okay. I'm going through a lot. Things like that. Even Googling like a therapist or joining a support group. You know, just joining a support group to help you also too. Googling stuff to give you more knowledge. You start where you are. You start where you're like you're comfortable too. I don't
Mhm.
want people to always feel like I got to do this, I got to do that. But start where you're comfortable, and like seeking help's a sign of. It's not a sign of weakness, also too.
Mhm.
Okay, I need a lot of
Mhm.
people to hear that. It's not a sign of
Mhm.
weakness. It's a declaration that your life matters. You know, that's what seeking help. It's a declaration your life matters, and you don't all need the answers right away. But to go out there, like I said, to tell your friend, tell someone you care about that you're not okay. Google, find a therapist, join a support group, things like that. That's how we start to seek the help. And myself too, I'm a prayer warrior. I pray and I ask God, God needs you to help me
Mhm.
with certain things
Mhm.
when I'm going through these things to
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm. So I think, you mentioned a lot of great things there, right? Having the courage, doing your own research, but also relying on the people around you and figuring out who really loves you, right? Because at the end of the day, I think it's easy for us to think that a lot of people are against us, but if we really think there's at least one or two people in the world who really care about you, I think we should all remember that, right? And that's kind of a
That's right.
theme.
That's right.
And on the shirt you have, love here. Something to always keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
And kind of on the flip side, like if someone came to you and said, "Hey, Donovan, I need some help with certain things in my life." I think some of the times we're scared to, either say the wrong thing or feel like we're not helping them. But, from your perspective, what's kind of the best way we can support someone, even if we're not like a trained professional?
Okay, that's a great question, but
Hmm.
that can be also challenging, but also too one of the greatest things you can do in life, right? The
Hmm.
first thing I'm gonna suggest 5 things that I've learned through studying, through school, things like that. But the first thing is you could listen to understand, not to fix. You listen to someone not to understand, not to fix it. There are people you go to sometimes that want to fix your problems just like that. Listen, I got a band-aid. Listen, I got some suggestions. Boom, listen, do this, and I'm gonna fix it. The first thing is listen to understand, not to fix. The second thing I'm gonna tell you right now is to check in often, okay? Not just when things are bad. Call that person when things are good. Call them when you see them on their Instagram, smiling, having a good time too. Just call them, not when just things are bad. Reach out to them for help. Those things are really powerful. That could change their lives. The third thing, just challenge the harmful language around mental health, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Like harmful language is like, are you a nut job? Even stuff like, oh, come on, man up, get over it. You know,
Hmm.
that's not a big deal.
Hmm.
You know, that stuff's not real. You're probably just feeling sad right now. You'll get over it. Okay. Fourth thing, normalize therapy also too. I want to tell you guys that too. So normalize therapy in our circles as men. You know what I mean? Talk about it like we talk about going to the gym to work out to get buff. Like we talk about dating. We talk about we feel about like our relationships. And the last but the most powerful thing is be vulnerable first. Okay, you got to be vulnerable yourself too when you're helping someone. Like sometimes when we open up, we give others permission to do the same, right?
Right.
So when
Hmm.
you want to open up and you have a friend that's going through, you have to open up too. Okay,
Hmm.
so open up and give permission to someone to do the same. Share
Hmm.
what's going on in your life.
Hmm.
Stigmatizing conversation. So I'm gonna say it. It's a saying I have: stigmatizing conversation. So let's keep talking.
Right. Yeah. Stigma only thrives when it's in the dark, right?
That's right.
And you talked about, leading by example, leading the way by, lighting up the path for others.
Yep.
Like you said, kind of like a domino effect almost. Like if one person talks about it, then someone else might feel more comfortable to talk about it. Yeah. And you mentioned like a lot of good steps about, either seeking help or helping like a loved one, right? And you
Yes.
mentioned before that, there's been a lot of your life experiences that have shaped, your perspective on mental health and your passion for, breaking down the stigma, right? But was
Mhm.
there kind of like a specific event that made you want to start Heart of a Man, or like was there like an impetus for it, or what's the story behind Heart of a Man?
Speaking specific event. One time
Yeah.
I was going through a lot myself. I was just facing a lot of stuff. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
Um, you know, it was basically Heart of Man was born from my personal need to heal. You know, and a realization that I need my heart to feel like I have more hope. And many men around were also suffering in silence too, right?
Hmm.
And I realized that like even with some friendships I've had too, we stayed quiet, But I was tired of wearing the mask myself, and I wanted to build something that wasn't just about awareness, but about real connection and like change. So Heart of a Man stands for the emotional like core that many men are taught to ignore. You know what I mean? It's not, it's not just you keep things internalized because Heart of a Man is like something when you need to just open up and share. The feeling we've been told to hide, the pain we've buried, and the power we reclaim when we finally speak. And when I realized I was getting the power when I finally was able to speak and share my story, being on global news,
Hmm.
doing different podcasts, sharing what
Hmm.
I've been through myself, things like that has been
Hmm.
it's really captivated my heart and changed my heart. So
Hmm.
that's why I started Heart of a Man. And that's why it's called Home, Heart of a Man.
Right.
We finally
Hmm.
get to speak and we get the power to do so.
Right. And, just because it's called Heart of a Man, I don't want our female viewers to think, there's not applicable things, right? But I just want,
Thank you.
yeah. Um,
Ladies, it's for you too. Heart
yeah.
of a Man.
Right.
I use the word man because men keep things internalized, but even women need the help too, and I'm there to support them. I'm an advocate for women also too when it comes to this stuff.
What's kind of been like you mentioned that you've been, on global news, you've done a lot of speaking. What was the original goal that you set out with? And you kind of touched on, raising awareness, making change, but was there like one specific thing that you kind of started out with in mind?
I the goal for Art of a Man was to one day I was actually looking out a mirrored window and I was thinking,
Hmm.
what can I do? And something came to my mind to redefine manhood through
Hmm.
mental health, right? So my goal was to dismantle the silence that's killing our brothers, women, you know,
Hmm.
everybody, and rebuild a culture where, emotional honesty is strength,
Hmm.
not weakness. So Heart of a Man, I wanted to aim to empower men to feel deeply, to heal loudly, and a place of a place of truth. So whether it's through workshops I wanted to create, I decided to do that. That's still been a challenge. I can't lie, but storytelling, like when I share my story, I've had support groups also too, just to talk about different things. Um, I went back into school to just learn more and educate myself to learn more about therapy. So now I'm doing therapy for Canadian Mental Health Association, right?
Hmm.
Also too, right?
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
our community spaces. The mission is always the same, like to liberate men from like emotional isolation.
That's been something that's kind of been perpetuated like through many, many years, right? So
Yes.
it's something that, is like you said, it's not really a band-aid fix, but it's really something great to work towards. And I remember something you told me specifically was, your slogan, which is overcome, elevate, inspire, right?
Yes.
What like I guess like, what was kind of the story behind, that slogan?
Overcome. Okay, so overcome, elevate, inspire was thing when I was going through a lot of stuff in my life. I I heard three words for someone. I was listening to someone on TV. He's a motivational speaker too. It was Bishop T.D. Jakes, and he said overcome. And I think the part of it was elevate and inspire. Overcome. You're gonna overcome the battles you face, right? When you
Hmm.
elevate your mind, your heart, you get the help you need. And when you get the help you need, you learn how to be vulnerable. You learn how to just understand who you are as a person. You're able to inspire yourself and then inspire others also too.
Hmm.
That's
Right.
overcome, elevate, inspire.
Hmm. So like, that's like one of the messages that, you've spread, and that's definitely stuck with me even after all these years. We met during the pandemic.
Yes.
And it's stuck with me all these years, and I think it's something that everyone can definitely live by. And you've mentioned a lot of great things about, stigma, asking for help, doing your research, what it means to be a man,
Mhm.
especially, as a person of color. But if there's one message that we haven't really touched on so far about mental health, that you would want viewers to know, like if they were to like just watch this part of the podcast,
Mhm.
what would it be?
You're you're not your trauma. You're not your mistakes. You're not weak for needing help. You're a human being. Healing isn't a destination. It's like a journey also too, right? There's no that's the end of the road and that's healing right there. It's a destination where you have to travel and take time. Well, you don't have to walk it alone also too. I want viewers to know that. Heart of a Man, myself, Donovan Mckenzie, I'm here for you. If you want to talk, want to reach out to someone, I'm here.
Mhm.
That's my message.
Awesome. Yeah, no, you've summarized a lot of great points. Like we talked about before, mental health isn't even something that we can address just on this podcast alone. There's, tons of podcasts out there, and
Yeah,
honestly,
yeah,
like we're honestly just, scratching the surface, as it is. But deeper conversations are definitely needed. Like we mentioned before, there's that stigma that's been around for hundreds, thousands of years. And it's something that people don't talk about enough, in my opinion, right?
yeah,
And you talked about it being an adventure, right? You're gonna have ups and downs. Some days are gonna be good, some days are gonna be bad. But like you said, you don't walk it alone.
yeah,
And it's about the enjoying the process, right, rather than the destination, right?
yeah.
And I guess like on the flip side, right? This podcast has been a lot about dispelling the stigma that
Mm-hmm.
exists, and when there's stigma, there's a lot of misconceptions, right? Um, especially when people don't talk about it very often in their household growing up. They don't talk about it with their friends very often. But what are some common like misconceptions that you hear that you wanted to address?
Great question. Love this. This is what I
Mhm,
hear misconceptions all the time.
mhm,
All the time. Could be my daily personal life, friends,
mhm,
family, whoever it is, right? But first thing
mhm,
I'm gonna say is um, that it only affects crazy people. That's a misconception. That men who talk about their emotions are also soft, right?
mhm,
That healing means like you have to have it all figured out. That's another misconception. So I'll say mental health. They say mental health isn't. They say mental health is something like, okay, let's not talk. It's a stigma. Let's not talk about it. But mental health is for everyone, right? Like you can be strong, you can be successful, and still be hurting. Okay, you can love your life and still need therapy also too. Even when you love your life, it's good to go get therapy to talk to someone because sometimes when you love your life, there's a lot of stress that comes in, there's burnout that comes in, right? There's different thing that comes in our mind that could sometimes keep us away from getting that help we need, right?
mhm,
So the biggest lie we've been told is that we're supposed to carry it all alone. No, we're not. It's okay to get help and talk to a friend, talk to a therapist. Like I
mhm,
say it again, the biggest lie we've been told that we're supposed to carry it all alone. I've seen it many
mhm.
times in my life, man. Like,
Right.
okay, I can deal with myself. I got this myself.
Mhm. Right.
Takes
It takes a village, right?
takes a
Yeah.
village. Yes.
Hmm.
Um, the world may have taught you, to numb it. You don't need to go get help. You can do it yourself, like I said before, or hide it. But you have the right to feel and the right to heal. Like having one conversation with a therapist, with a support worker, you know what I mean, with a friend, can change everything. You know. So let's that's a sign. That's a sign of a start. That's a start of your journey.
Hmm.
Things like that.
Hmm. And I would even add that like yes, well, it is a good start, right? And it's probably the first step is the hardest to take. I would say like don't be disencouraged just because, one conversation doesn't, like I said, put a band-aid over everything, right?
Yeah, you know
Yeah,
what?
you
Oh, that's actually really
yeah.
powerful. Something I want to add to that. You got to
Hmm.
stop trying to earn your worth by carrying the weight of the world. You got to speak up. You got to let people in. You're worth love. Everyone. Even when you're not performing, even when you're in pain, and you feel just ashamed of your tears. There's proof that you feel, and that's a beautiful thing too, right? It's a beautiful thing. I want you guys to all know that. I want everyone to know that too.
Hmm. Right. And I think something you've also told me before and something that I've seen you, posted a lot on social media is, what hope actually is, right? Hold on, pain ends, right? It's that yeah,
Remember it. That's
yeah,
amazing.
that's one of the things that I think, really resonates with me and it kind of is what I remember, your brand for. Because I think, a lot of things we see as permanent, right? Whether it be, like our marks or how we do in sports, right? Those things don't really define us. Um,
Yeah.
but it's, the ability to, show up for other people,
Hmm.
ask for help when you need it, right? And I guess that kind of leads into the next question. You've kind of already touched on it, but I'm wondering if, you could add anything about, what would you give, advice? What advice would you give to someone who's kind of struggling? You mentioned, doing your research, things like that, but is there one specific thing that if anyone's watching, like they could take away from this?
I did
Mm,
say, though,
mm,
one conversation can change everything. You
mhm,
gotta just understand that vulnerability is not. I know the world says vulnerability is weakness, but vulnerability can be actually a sign of strength to speak up and to open up about the problems you're facing inside. Just picking up the phone, going up to
mm,
a friend, you know,
mm,
asking God for that help.
mhm,
My advice is just to speak up,
mhm,
speak out. Don't numb your pain or hide it. You know,
right,
it doesn't make you weak to share it. I'm telling you right now, I am a tall Jamaican black man. I told myself if I share things, I'm gonna seem weak. Well, I'm sharing it now, and I feel stronger than before.
mhm. hmm Do you have any advice on how to like maybe like the language you should use? Like should it be face to face, over the phone? Like, do you practice, saying it out loud? Like when
That's
it actually
that's
comes.
that's such a beautiful thing. So
Yeah.
I noticed I started writing, and when I saw a therapist, he told me to use a book and write. I said, "Isn't that a diary? Isn't that for women only?" I was like, so it was hard for me to do it, but I started writing my feelings down too, right? Telling myself stuff, like affirmations. Even looking in the mirror sometimes and saying things when you feel down, and just speaking to yourself. Yeah, that's the most powerful thing. Words are powerful. Words could change your life. Words could change your mind. If sometimes you got to go in the mirror and say, you know what, I am strong. I am resilient. I can overcome and I can elevate and I can feel inspired. You
Mhm.
know, I have a heart. I've been weak before and I will continue. Sometimes being strong is when you go get help when you feel you're weakest, also, too, like I said, right?
Mhm.
Going to get the help you need. Talk to yourself in the mirror you need to. Pick up the phone and call somebody. Call me. Give you my number. You could call me too.
hmm Yeah. I think like you said, just being there for people, right? Offering, right?
Yes,
You never know who it's gonna
you
help,
never
right?
know. You never know.
Yeah, it can be something that's incredibly difficult to reach out in the first place. So I think just like fostering that, sense of culture, and community around others, right? And I kind of want to ask you kind of a personal question, but now that you're a parent, right?
Hmm.
How do you foster that, sense of like um openness and that sense of like resilience with your own children.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's probably the most
Yeah.
powerful
Yeah.
question I've
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
So I'll be open and honest.
Yeah.
We got to be real. My son's been going through a lot. I haven't seen my son smile in a very long time, right?
Mhm.
I remember one time I even yelled at him because I got a call from his teacher, and that's not what we're supposed to do. Yelling doesn't solve it, right?
Mhm.
Instead, what I did was I sat down and started to talk to him, and I got him the help. I signed him up to see a therapist, right? I had to
Mhm.
do that. That's one of the
Yeah.
things I did.
Mhm.
Next thing I did was I just call him, send him messages, send him inspirational quotes. Even if he doesn't read it, it's still there. One day he might look at it when he's at his lowest and say,
Mhm.
"My dad sent me this, and now I remember." You
Mhm.
know, giving him a hug. I tell him I love him all the time when I get off the phone with him. I
Mhm.
know in our culture and different, cultures, the word love you is not seen as weakness. So don't say that, but I love you, son. It's okay to say that stuff. Stuff like that is what, but it's tough right now because my son is going through a lot,
Mhm.
and I could say that openly. And I just want to be there for him.
Right.
I got to
Mhm.
be there for him as much as I can
Right.
and show him what it means to really open his heart and be vulnerable.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's something that, I'm not a parent, but I think that's one of the most difficult parts of parenthood, right?
Yeah,
Is, really understanding what your kids are going through. And, I know for parents it can hurt, double as much as it hurts
it
their kids,
does.
right?
Yeah.
And, that's one of the toughest things that people go through out of the love for their kids. And, I guess kind of flipping it around on the flip side, has there been kind of a highlight for you as like a mental health advocate, either, with your own family, with speaking? Was there kind of like almost like a breakthrough moment where, you felt like everything really paid off?
Well, the highlight for me is hearing someone say, once, because of the heart of a man thing you did, I finally told someone how I felt, you
Mhm.
know, or I booked my first therapy session. Don, you know what? I appreciate you sending me this link to this therapist, because it really changed my life, knowing that this movement has sparked like, healing, in
Mhm.
others has been something that it's been one of the biggest breakthroughs in my life. Like realizing that the vulnerability isn't the opposite of masculinity. You know, it's the evolution of it. Men are allowed to feel also too, as I say, and when we do, we begin to break generational curses. I'll
Mhm.
say it loud. We could begin to break generational curses and
Yeah.
generational cycles too.
Mhm. Right. I think that's, a big responsibility, that someone can take on. But, I know you're hardworking at it and you've taken the time to educate yourself and, you've worked with so many different people. You have a lot of wisdom. So, thanks for all that you do for, all the people out there, not just me,
Thank
but
you.
everyone
Means
out
a
there,
lot.
right? And,
Means a lot.
yeah, and you've touched on that point about, seeing, I guess, your hard work pay off for other people, right? Seeing other people benefit from, the work that you do, the advocacy that you do. And I guess like one final question for you is, where do you see Heart of a Man going? Or where do you see, your personal life going? Like any future goals, that we can see from you.
My future goals is to become either a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist
Hmm.
soon. I did go to school, do social work. I would like to go to school, become a psychotherapist. That's a future goal of mine also
Hmm.
too, to help people. I want my Heart of a Man. I've always had this big dream for Heart of a Man to become like a global movement.
Hmm.
But you got to put in a lot of hard work. That takes a lot of like passion. It takes a lot of hard work. And I want to bring the message into schools like I have. I even said to myself, barbershops, churches, workplaces, even prisons if I need to. I
Hmm.
want to launch my own podcast. I want to publish a book.
Hmm.
You know, I would love to create like healing retreats. I always said
Hmm.
that in my mind, and
Yeah.
train men to be like emotional leaders in their families,
Hmm.
and communities. Like
Right.
I want Heart of a Man to be the reason men choose life,
Hmm.
choose healing, and choose to show up as their full self.
Hmm. Awesome. Awesome. We look forward to seeing that from you. I'm gonna, need a signed copy of that book, for sure. I guess, sorry, one final question that's maybe more applicable to our viewers here today. When you have like a passion that you're chasing every day, and like you said, it's a lot of hard work, right? I'm sure, not every day is easy, right? Being like a business owner, advocate, entrepreneur, that kind of thing, right? What motivates you to, get out of bed on those days when you don't feel like working?
um, Everyone has a why, right? Why they do something. I think one of the reasons I get out of bed because I'm supposed to um, help my son feel like there's hope. One,
Hmm.
help other men, give men hope, revolutionize manhood, and I feel like my I feel like I've been called to do something to really inspire and change um, the stigmas in this world, or defeat the stigmas in this world, break the stigmas, battle the stigmas, and overcome a lot of these things that we see as men.
Hmm. Right.
Just that's why I wake up in the morning, and that's the
Mhm.
first thing.
Right. I think
That's why I stay up.
you touched on a few good points, finding that why,
Yeah,
whatever it may be, whether it be mental health or,
yeah.
saving the environment, saving animals,
Saving
that kind of thing.
animals,
Yeah.
environment, whatever it is. We
Hmm.
all have a why. We all have a
Right.
purpose in this world, right?
And that'll keep you going, right? And
That's
then
right.
you mentioned, part of that why could be like family, right? You want to, support your family, care for your family, and then like ultimately create a better world for your family
That's
in the future, right?
yeah.
Um, so those are some really powerful things. So we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Donovan, so much for your time today. It's always good catching up with you and hearing what you're up
Definitely.
to.
Yes.
These have been some stories that I've been fortunate enough to hear for a few years now and
Yeah.
really reflect on them. So I hope our viewers are able to do the same kind of reflection because there are a ton of good insights here.
Uh-huh.
Um, Definitely something that I think people might have to watch more than once to truly, get everything in there.
Yeah.
And maybe even like send this to a friend, like you said, check in with people, just telling people it's okay, right?
There's five things.
Yeah.
Just remember that. There's five things
Hmm.
I mentioned. This
Yeah.
was a pleasure to be on the
Hmm.
show to
Yeah.
be able to
Uh,
speak about this
yeah.
too.
I'm definitely gonna clip those five things.
Yeah.
I think those, yeah, like you said, if there's one thing that you want to get out there, those are the five things we got to remember,
That's
right?
right.
So it's I forgot to mention at the beginning, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So that's another good reason. Check in on your friends, especially during this time. But thanks, Donovan, so much. Thank you everyone so much for watching. We'll see everyone next week. Peace out.